Hi there, I'm Jake from VikingHistory.com. Today, we'll be making this hat, which is a reconstruction of a hat based on a textile fragment found at the Hedeby Harbour settlement, which was a major trading center in Viking Age Denmark. Before we actually get into the construction of the hat, I do just want to talk a little bit about why we're making this hat and some context around the textile fragment that was found at the settlement. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Kamil Rabiega, the author of this book, The Viking Dress Code, talks a little bit about this hat. He says, apart from hoods, hats with a flat top were worn. The Hedeby cap was made of woolen cloth in 2/2 twill with ZS twisted yarn and the density of 8 warp threads and 8 weft threads per 1 centimeter. The preserved fragment measures 15 centimeters to 32 centimeters and consists of 2 parts connected with a seam. The edge of one of the fragments is curved, and the second piece is sewn to the curve, creating a pattern with a rounded tip and straight sides. There are some members of the archaeological community that do debate whether or not the textile fragment in question was actually a cap. That's due to 2 main reasons. The first is that, well, it is just a fragment. It's hard to tell what it was a part of or if it was a part of a larger garment. The second reason is that it's believed to have been found in the upper part of a well. However, there are a few reasons why we should consider it as reasonable fashion for the Viking Age and usable for a Danish persona. The first reason is that they existed before the Viking Age and after the Viking Age. This doesn't necessarily denote that they were in use or even popular during the Viking Age, but it meant that this garment was possible. The second reason is that there was another, more complete hat actually found pretty close in Leens in the Netherlands. Its proximity to Denmark means that it may be a really good analogous version that we can base our patterns off of. Okay, so now that we've discussed the context and the validity of this textile fragment, you should be able to make your own decision on whether or not this fits in with your Hedeby or wider Danish persona. Now let's take a look at our tools and materials to see what we need to get started. First, we'll need some needles for hand stitching. We're not going to do any of this on the machine. You could probably try doing it, but I think just because of how small the project is, it might just be easier to do some hand stitching. It's a more authentic way to go. The thread of your choice, a soft tape measure, a pair of scissors, a pencil. I'd recommend a fabric pen or a fabric marker if you have one. I've got this cutting mat. This is optional. It's just what I use to protect the countertops. Some form of pattern drafting material. You can use paper, you can use cardboard, whatever's easier for you. I also have my fabric, which is a lot of fabric. I'm using this for another project, but I know that I'm gonna have enough for what that other project will be. So we only really need a little bit. You might need probably about 1/4 of a yard of fabric, maybe even less. I did measure my head before I even started this, and I know that I will need about 24 inches by 6 inches wide. You really don't need a lot. I would recommend that you just check around the house, see what you have for scrap fabric first, and try to start there. The last thing that we'll need is a hat. This really is optional, but I do think that having the top part of the hat, the area that goes right around the crown and sits on the top of your head, rather than be a circle, I think it would be better as an oval. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is actually use this hat to sort of get that shape, and then we'll take our measurements and figure out what the circumference of that actually needs to be, and we'll start there. There's 2 pieces to this hat. One piece is the long strip of fabric that runs around the main body of the hat, and the second piece is the oval or circle that goes around the crown of our head. I'm going to measure first what I want that strip of fabric to be like. What I'm going to do is just take my soft tape measure, put it around my head, probably at the widest part, maybe here. Depends on how far you want your hat to come down. If you want it to come down over your ears or just above your ear, that's up to you, but you need to figure out what's the widest part of your head so that it's not really tight in one place. For me, that's probably going to be right about here. So I'm going to wrap it around until those 2 pieces meet. And one little trick is, if you don't want your hat really tight, you can put your thumb in between your head and the actual tape measure. That'll give you a little bit of extra room. So that feels pretty good. That's right about 22.5 inches. So what I'd like to do is create a strip of fabric that's 22.5 inches long, but I know that it's going to wrap around and sew to itself. So I'm going to need to allow for seam allowance, which is going to be about 1/2 inch on either end, so a full inch, which would bring us to 23.5 inches for the circumference of my head. The next thing you want to do is find out how tall the hat is going to be and how wide that strip of fabric for the body will be. So what you can do is you can get just maybe like a pencil or something flat to rest on top of your head, or you can even use your hand and your thumb. And you're going to take this end of the measuring tape and go down to as far down as you want your hat to go. I'm going to have mine just above my ears. So I'm going to measure there. And then I rest my hand on top of my head, nice and flat, and just stick my thumb out as straight as I can and find that measurement. So that's about 5 1/4, 5.5 inches. And again, if we want to add that seam allowance to either end, because this is going to account for the hem that runs around the brow line, your ears, and the back of your head, and then also the hem, or rather the seam that runs around the crown of your head, that's going to be a full inch. So I'll probably go about 6.5 inches wide and about 23.5 inches long. So I'll show you what that strip of fabric looks like next. We'll also measure what that crown piece will look like with our hat. Okay, time for every history major's favorite activity, math. So in order to get this top piece of the hat, I have traced this hat to get this shape that's not really a circle, but more like an oval, because I think it'll fit my head a little bit better. In order to make sure that this shape is still matching with the circumference of my head, the measurement that we took earlier, which was 22.5 inches, I've gone ahead and put a little equation over here. So we know that the circumference equation is 2 pi r, or 2 times the radius times pi. So if we divide either side by 3.14, what we get is 2r, or the diameter, 2 times the radius, and that equates to 7.162. This measurement here across is 7 inches, and this measurement across here is 8 inches. So we're pretty close. And if I can measure along any of these radius points, I would probably get something very close to 3.58, which is the actual radius. So that just confirms that this shape is in fact going to match the larger body strip of fabric that's going to be the part of the hat that gives it height, and then this will go on the top and these measurements will match. So that's good. Let's cut them out and put them onto our fabric. Right now I'm just cutting out those shapes out of the fabric here, and I'm starting with the crown portion that goes at the top of the head, and next I'm going to move on to that long strip piece that's going to wrap around. And I just wanted to remind you that if you don't have a hat to trace, you can actually just create a circle and just play with that shape. You know, if you have some scrap fabric, start with that, and then you can pin the pieces together, see what fits, and then transfer that onto your actual fabric and start cutting out. So we've finished sewing up the construction portion of the hat. The rest of the sewing will be finishing touches. But what we've done is we've taken this long strip, the body of the hat, sewed it to itself, and then sewed this top part on. So the next steps will be to fell down these seams around the top and around the back side of the hat. And then what we will also do is do a hemline around the front, so that when we turn it inside out, these bottom seams will be doubled up and a little bit more rigid. What I really like about this wool is that it is a bit thicker, and so it does kind of stand up on its own, which gives the hat a little bit more rigidity, a little bit more shape, and it also makes for a warmer hat. Well, there we have it, our finished hat. Super simple and easy design, and a great and easy way to complement the rest of your Viking persona. Well, thanks for joining us. That's it for today's video. If you found this information helpful, consider giving us a like or share with your medieval-minded friends. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more from our channel, and if there's something that you think we could have done better, or a new topic you'd like to see in another video, let us know in the comments below. We'll also be sure to link this video and all the other videos in this series into a playlist so that you can watch through and make all of these garments along with us to add them to your Viking persona. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.